have the Dash paywall, and hopefully we get this kind of stuff in Edge too soon. But you can actually look someone up by username, friend them, send them a transaction, new address every time, acts like a self address, and it just works. I send you and it just works.
This podcast is sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you could find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com.
So Joel, we met, years ago, if I remember correctly, Texas Bitcoin Conference. And you're one of the few people that I'd met that had a similar alignment with being able to use crypto in day-to-day activities. I can't remember, were you already living off crypto at that point in time?
I would say yes, because I sort of started using crypto. I started talking about it in 2012. And then 2013, I got someone paid me back for a pizza.
Nice,
enough, right?
Yeah.
And so then I just spent it. I gave like rides to the airport in 2014 and only accepted Bitcoin for that. Did a few things. It wasn't until the end of 2015 that I just said, I'm only going to earn crypto. No one will pay me in fiat. So if it was after 2015, what got me into the crypto industry, because guess who pays you in crypto? The crypto industry.
Exactly.
Then that would have been it.
Yeah, we've paid everybody in Bitcoin since day one at our company. It was after 2015. I think it was 2017 when we first launched Edge. So you're already living on crypto. And I know that at least since then, you've been a big promoter of Dash. You've done marketing for Dash, created a lot of the content. Talk to me about what makes Dash such a compelling currency from the viewpoint of someone that wants to live on crypto.
Yeah. So what I would say is the number one thing is the sort of just works experience, right? Very low fees, instant settlement. So I send it and that's it. You don't have to be, well, are there confirmations? Did this work out? Did that work out? It works well.
Yep. Privacy
features. And the biggest thing is, and we have some usability features now, such as usernames, contact lists, the invoice, the encrypted metadata for transactions is there on the blockchain. So if I say this was for coffee or whatever, and you lose your phone and you restore it, you're like, oh, what was that payment for? It just says address, but now that's actually written, that's able to be transcribed. And so it just has like the entire experience that you have on like the blockchain level that you kind of need to use like payments in more modern real context. And it's actually usable as far as, I don't know anything else that has the same breadth of adoption into different services and tools that allow you to live all on crypto. Maybe you could say Bitcoin in some ways, although then you have to deal with the Bitcoin chain, which is not primed for payments. And
talk about that. So what makes it less primed for payments? And I'm already on the same boat with you in that respect. Like it's become the store of value narrative. But comparing the Bitcoin to the Dash chain from the viewpoint of payments, what makes Bitcoin a little bit subpar versus Dash being like this great payments network?
Yeah, so just going to from the user experience perspective, if you send a Bitcoin transaction, first off, you have to wait and see if it goes through properly. And you could wait 5 minutes, you could wait 5 hours. I've waited 2 weeks for a Bitcoin transaction before, and I thought I paid several dollars for a fee. It wasn't, and this is 2016. This is way back in the day.
And this is before it got really bad in like 2017, 18.
And I've, a different time. So you don't know how long it's going to take, and you don't know how much you're going to pay. Sometimes you get lucky, you get a 5, 10 cent, 20 cent Bitcoin transaction fee. Sometimes you get $5, $10, $20 one. That doesn't necessarily work out. Whatever privacy tools there are for Bitcoin aren't typically baked into Bitcoin wallets or the protocol or anything like that. And you juggle a million different address types depending on, is this a SegWit one? Is this a Taproot address? Is this a legacy one? Is this actually a Bitcoin SD address? So what about a Bitcoin Cash one? there's more confusion there.
But in Dash,
one address type.
You haven't changed it.
Yes,
since
you
day one.
can, if you have the Dash paywall, and hopefully we get this kind of stuff in Edge too soon. But you can actually look someone up by username, friend them, send them a transaction, new address every time, acts like a self address, and it just works. I send you and it just works. And when you have a payment processor, like let's say Bitrefill, right? When I want to come here to this conference, I had to get an eSIM because I don't have a European phone carrier.
Right.
And so I go to Bitrefill and just scan the QR code, pay, and there you go. I got it. That's it.
Nice.
Just the amount of thought process.
So Bitrefill does support Dash.
Yes.
Nice.
And so the amount of thought process of like, well, how long am I going to take? How's my fee? You just send, all those things are gone. You use it and it works.
Now, Dash has a unique method. I'm not sure how much of the technical understanding you have, but it's been around for quite some time. In an era of the Bitcoin Litecoins, which were proof of work and took at least minutes to get a confirmation. Now, how does Dash accomplish this instant finality, which is more common in a lot of the newer chains like a Solana, Aptos, Sui, which have a completely different architecture, generally speaking, very little, if zero privacy. How has Dash managed to accomplish this instant finality? Yeah,
so first of all, you send to get in the technical level, right? You send the transaction, it shows up on the blockchain in the mempool. It's difficult. There's like the zero conf you hear a lot, especially Bitcoin cashers talk about.
Right.
It's pretty hard to reverse. It's not impossible to reverse. And then in about 2.5 minutes, it could hopefully get into a block. But in the meantime, Dash's masternode network, which provides the majority of the chain security, then will lock in the inputs instantly and make them unable to be spent anywhere else. So you cannot reverse the transaction. It gets kind of locked in and it's included in the block instantly. And when a block is first seen on the network, the masternode network also locks it in, similar to like a checkpoint or something, makes it irreversible.
And the masternode network, talk about that, because most people know about Bitcoin and miners and using hash power to secure the network. What exactly are these masternodes, and then who are these masternodes? How does one become one?
So Dash has a two kind of tier type system where you have miners and then you have masternodes, which are a group of nodes that are incentivized. They're paid by the network, and you have to own at least 1,000 units of Dash in order to run.
What does that come to right now? I know prices.
$5,000 or something.
All right,
like
so
that,
hefty, but not like impossible for a lot of let's say commercial operators.
Yeah, so masternodes are considered what's called proof of service, which is basically they add service to the network. They do some extra things. And on the other hand, there's a masternode type called the evolution masternode, which also runs the basic Dash core chain, but also runs the evolution chain, which does data things. And that's a little bit more of a familiar architecture to modern things in that it has like 1 to 3 second block times.
I see. Got it. For the more instant finality. But as a separate chain, meaning if you transact on the main Dash chain, you're not transacting on this newer chain.
Sometimes you will do two transaction on each chain where it's like I send you the main Dash payment, but then I record the invoice data or whatever encrypted on the other chain.
So it has some similarities to another protocol we support with FIO, where exactly you send the metadata on one chain and then you send the actual payment on another.
Yeah.
But baked into what effectively is the same ecosystem for Dash.
Yes, same validator set and stuff like that.
Got it. Okay. What's on the horizon? I know there were a lot of things on the horizon for Dash. Sounds like a lot of it has already shipped, such as like the name resolution, which we were looking at implementing a couple of years ago, but it wasn't ready at the time. Anything that's still on the horizon for Dash?
Yes. So when you're, I guess, timestamping it to May, was it May? Yes, May. May 2025. May 2025. In the next week or so, there's a new release for tokens and token marketplaces and things like that. And so hopefully we're getting like some stable coins and things like that are usable on the Evolution network. And then a bunch of SDKs and things to help build out a lot easier. Within the next year, I should expect full smart contracts.
Are these going to be like EVM style or completely different programming language?
We're looking at some options. The Evolution chain is loosely Cosmos based, so that's always That's always
use the Cosmos SDK to be built.
I don't think so. I think it's Tender Dash Consensus is what it's called. It's
Tender Dash.
It's heavily modified at this point.
Got it.
So smart contracts could be on the way. We're also looking at a core chain, is in the original Dash chain, privacy overhaul in the next year or so.
Let's talk about that. We're here at ETHDam today, by the way, and so this is probably the premier crypto privacy event in all of Europe. Although it's ETHDam, there is some level of focus on ETH. Clearly, it is much more open to different chains. Dash is a sponsor here at ETHDam. And so what brings Dash to such a privacy-focused conference? Talk a little bit about its functionality, features, and history on the privacy side.
Let's start with the history, I guess. So Dash started for most of the first year, Dash was known as Darkcoin. And the number one feature was this integrated coin join feature, which just basically mixes people's funds together so that you can't necessarily tell who you received something from. You can't tell necessarily the origin. They call it breaking the transaction graph.
No, in those early days, Darkcoin was, to my recollection, a fork of at least a path of Litecoin.
It was a fork of Litecoin for a few months or a few years, and then it ended up being rebased to Bitcoin because, little known fact, Litecoin was kind of not maintained at that time. And then later it became maintained.
Much more maintained.
Now is much more.
So it's a fork of that ecosystem of Bitcoin Litecoin.
Yes.
Which didn't have any level of privacy, not to the level of mixing. Now, when it was branded Darkcoin initially, was the mixing something at the protocol level that was unique to it, or more at the applications?
I do believe it was always at the protocol level.
At the protocol level.
I don't remember, and this is where I think things changed very rapidly during that first year. And I don't remember, I think there was some special mixing server built into the protocol they had, but now it's run by the masternode network. So every time you go through a round of mixing, a different subset of masternodes kind of takes care of that. So you're kind of rotating through all of them. Multiple rounds, there's there's kind of uniform denominations. There's no change. That's the one thing that happens a lot of CoinJoin implementations, is you have something called toxic change, where you have to not
exposes
touch the change. Yeah, whereas with Dash, it just spends all the change, and depending on the denomination, so you don't have anything like that to deal with. There's a bunch of interesting stuff like that. And this is where, my depth of knowledge at that time wasn't necessarily the greatest, but it was sort of like Dash, it got renamed to Dash in 2015. And it was kind of like a Dash versus Monero vibe at that time. I don't remember, I believe Monero had ring signatures, but did not have confidential transactions, which hides amounts, until 2017, from my recollection. And
you may be right. I don't recall the history of Monero's privacy technology until about 2018.
Yes.
When it had full, I call it 3-level privacy, right? Sender privacy, recipient, and amount. And by the time we integrated Monero in 2018, it had all three. Which technology it used, I'm not sure, because I know confidential transactions is one technology to use. And there are other technologies it could have used. So Dash had mixing.
Yes.
Talk about where the state of Dash is today with privacy. Is it still the mixing via the masternodes, or has any additional privacy functionality been added, such as sender, recipient?
Yeah, so it's still the same basic thing that's been kind of tweaked and improved over the years. After the Dash rebrand, a lot of focus started to go more on let's try to make this as usable for everyday commerce, things like that. And so it was never like de-emphasized. It just was not something it was focused on. And recently,
percentage of its marketing kind of like shrunk. Like if you're talking about privacy half the time before, now you're talking about it like maybe 10% of the time.
And so in the last year or so, I've gotten a lot more, I kind of pushed, there was some talk about, well, we should do an overhaul, things like that. I kind of pushed a lot more for that. And so Dash is going to add confidential transactions in the near future. There was a DAO vote they've recently passed to do that. And so that would do two things. First of all, it's a lot easier to just implement a non-interactive basic privacy kind of thing, where every wallet can just have a CT address, and then I could send to you. Everyone can see I sent to you, but no one can see how much it is. And it's just some sort of thing where, in the polite world of like, I don't want to go to jail for this stuff or whatever, that kind of thing, you still get a very basic amount of like data that gets removed that otherwise would be there. But when you combine that with the CoinJoin functionality, then you have significantly better privacy. And the biggest thing is the user experience difference. Instead of having to mix a little bit ahead of time, and then it's ready to spend if you've pre-mixed, but it takes some time. Now it'd be just a few seconds, and then you're there. And so
it'll be part of a standard transaction for the CoinJoin, the mixing.
From my understanding, again, this is still all future, right? So I guess come back in a year and we'll know exactly what it looks like, but probably it would be part of like whatever wallet has the interactive mixing feature. It just does that. And so it would be similar to what you could say, like the way Monero does things, or the way Litecoin does it with MWeb, where you have the CT plus a little bit of a mixing kind of element to it, except it would be before the transaction, not at the time of the transaction. And so kind of all in the same vein. There's some other stuff which a friend of mine who's kind of doing a lot of this stuff, who runs the Hush project, which is a zero knowledge kind of Zcash fork. He has something very interesting called Seach, which is, I guess, the name's a model after something in Dune, but it basically was meant to close loopholes in privacy in the kind of Zcash shielded model, where you can still tell by the number of like outputs if it was a single party transaction or a multi-party transaction. And so what it does is it creates a couple of zero out of
decoys.
Decoy out, but not necessarily decoy in that they are real outputs. They just don't have any money there. And so
I see. And you can't sell because of confidential transactions. You can't really tell.
Yes. And so basically it's high possibility we get that in Dash as well, so that kind of adds that extra layer at the actual sending. So then you have the obfuscation beforehand, and then when you send, it sends with a couple other sort of decoys.
And these are on the main Dash chain, not on the Evolution chain.
Yes. Nice. I think a lot of emphasis over the last several years, like 3, 4, 5 years, has been mostly the Evolution chain.
Correct.
And that'll probably be the same way moving forward. But I do like Dash is in 100% of its adoption today is on the core chain. And I do believe that sending scarce, decentralized private crypto is like the killer app, even though, we need tokens and stable coins and data things. That's all cool, but that's like the business model. That's like I wouldn't say it's a distraction, but that's like the business model on top of the core thing. I think it's imperative you keep the basic offering competitive and working. Right,
which you've been relying on for years is the payment side of it. And I've always felt that, a base chain should focus on its ability to transfer the value.
Yeah.
Right. Secure the value, transfer the value. And if you were to have any kind of side chain, L2 and whatnot, that incorporated added on functionality, then that is a decent mix of the two, right?
Yes.
Make sure the base level can scale and it can transact.
And I like stablecoins are super popular today, and I think they'll get more popular. And first of all, I got into, as I like to tell people, that Peter Schiff got me into crypto because I was a gold and silver bug, and Peter Schiff had some gold debit card. I wanted to just live only on gold, Some things don't change, right? But at some point, everyone's using stable coins. They're still using depreciating fiat denominated things over time. And if they're centralized stable coins, even though the protocol can send them back and forth, no problem, the main issuer, like I'm not going to name any names, but whatever, they could block or
Circle, Coinbase, USDC. I'll say them. I'll name them for you.
And again,
Tether.
Great. In most cases, great companies that are doing a very valuable service. It's not their fault, but at some point we're going to need to go back to real money. Kind of like the Bitcoin revolution was. It was the whole package. It wasn't just, it was private money. Now, Bitcoin was never super private, but it stood in as private because it's not attached to identity.
It was a KYC free money, at least at the base layer.
Anyone could use it, uncensorable money, and then sound money. And so I think those three pillars will still be there. I think we see like a lot of projects are sort of like branching out and then converging on a lot of the same type of principles. Like, for example, Zcash is exploring like a proof of work, proof of stake hybrid, for example, and then like tokenization of like shielded assets and things like that.
That's why a lot of these chains, a lot of people feel that while there's an explosion of thousands of chains, we'll end up converging because by and large, there's huge overlap.
Yeah.
And we don't need thousands. And even though we support a whole bunch, that's because we're in this exploratory phase of not knowing which ones will pan out, what technologies will work. So we need to support a lot of them for now.
Yeah, for sure.
With respect to Dash, you'd mentioned obviously a bit of privacy on the roadmap, some programmability via evolution. What's what you would call the next functionality use case that you're hoping to see more widely adopted within the Dash ecosystem? That nugget of functionality, is that the usernames, is it some kind of data storage, whatnot? If you could say, hey, I wish everyone was using this piece of functionality that's either up and coming or just barely out, right? Just barely in the hands of people, what would that be within the Dash ecosystem?
Yeah, it's really hard to pinpoint one. I would definitely say the username and contact list setup is something you don't see a lot of other places where the connections are actually on the blockchain as well. So it's not like you just have to lose a list of usernames or whatever. Being able to transmit encrypted data back and forth, including encrypted messages back and forth. So now like you create the whole like what is it, like the WeChat thing, the X app, whatever.
But encrypted and private.
Yeah, but just, the way it should be and just usable. And the amount of like payment standards, because, I use a few different cryptocurrencies, mostly Dash, but a few different ones across a variety of services. Oh, this one has a memo field you have to put in, otherwise your money gets lost. Oh, this one, this thing. Oh, this one, the number of people who don't have BIP21 in, which is the basic protocol of
URI standard.
Yeah, just like address and amount equals whatever, all in a
blows my mind too as well.
It's actually getting worse. Fewer new services have this now. It's on the decline. I'm just like, the amount of things where I would just like to be able to say, what's your username? There you go. And that's it.
I think it's on the decline because payments were unfortunately on the decline. And we saw a lot of the features that
definitely UTXO payments are on the decline for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that, and everything else, it's just like send 28 USDT to this address.
Yeah. And UTXO, just for people listening, are kind of the Bitcoin class cryptocurrencies such as Dash, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, Doge, for those that are big fans. Those are in the UTXO architecture of cryptocurrencies. Yeah, cool. So you'd mentioned, okay, well, who knows what's going to happen? Check back next year. Well, between now and next year, you do a whole lot of content for the Dash ecosystem. So maybe people can get up to date with some of the stuff some of the updates within the Dash ecosystem. Where can people check out some of that content if this is a good little sneak peek?
Yeah, I'm heavy on X.
Cool.
X.com/dashpay.
Right.
And that's the best way to go for everything, I would say. Obviously, there's a Telegram channel as well. There's a Discord. The Discord's more active. There's all kinds of stuff. We're going to be putting out tons of content. But yes, the X.com/dashpay is the best place.
Cool. Joel Valenzuela, thanks so much for the chat and for educating people on Dash.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for chat.
Cool.